It was the middle of the night when the phone rang. The room was dark, peaceful, and the weight of sleep pressed down on me. The quiet was thick, the kind that lulls you into a sense of security. But that piercing ring shattered it all. My hand groped blindly in the dark, fingers finally finding the phone. I pressed it to my ear, expecting nothing more than a wrong number. But what I heard on the other end made my heart drop. "Hello, is this Mrs. Green?" The voice was familiar but shaky, and I struggled to place it in my half-asleep state. "Yes," I whispered, sitting up now, the cold air sending a shiver down my spine. "It's Mrs. Grant from Lily's school." Her voice trembled, and in that pause an overwhelming sense of dread filled me. "There's been a fire at the kindergarten. You need to come quickly." For a moment I couldn't breathe. The words seemed to echo in the room, filling every corner, drowning out every other thought. Fire. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands turning cold as I clutched the phone. "Lily, is she okay?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely more than a whisper. She didn't answer immediately, and that silence was more terrifying than anything she could have said. "They're still trying to get everyone out," she finally said, her voice strained. I dropped the phone, my heart pounding as I turned to David, my husband. Shaking him awake, I could barely get the words out, my voice cracking with panic. "David, get up. The kindergarten, there's a fire. Lily?" He sat up, blinking in confusion, but when he saw my face, the sleep vanished from his eyes. Within seconds, we were both out of bed, grabbing coats, shoes, whatever we could find, and rushing out the door. The drive to the school felt like an eternity. The streets were empty, silent, as we sped through the darkness, headlights illuminating the road in front of us. I clutched the dashboard, my nails digging into the leather, each second feeling like an hour. My mind was racing, images of Lily's face flashing before my eyes, her bright smile, the way she'd hug me tightly every morning before school, her little voice telling me, "Bye, Mommy, I love you." I couldn't lose her. I couldn't even let the thought settle in my mind. My hands were shaking, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. "Please," I whispered to no one in particular, my voice trembling. "Please, let her be okay." When we arrived at the school, I froze. Flames towered above the building, casting an eerie glow against the night sky. It was an image out of a nightmare, orange and red licking up the walls, smoke billowing up into the air, thick and dark. The smell of burning wood and plastic filled my nostrils, suffocating, making it hard to breathe. Firefighters were everywhere, hoses spraying water, voices shouting, alarms blaring. A group of children stood huddled together, their faces streaked with soot, eyes wide with fear. I scanned each face, desperate, praying to see Lily's small, familiar face among them. But she wasn't there. My heart was racing, pounding so hard it hurt, my body shaking as I called out her name. "Lily!" My voice was lost in the chaos, swallowed up by the sound of crackling flames and shouts. I tried to push forward, to reach the building, but a firefighter held me back, his grip firm. "Ma'am, it's not safe," he said, his voice stern yet sympathetic. "We're doing everything we can to get everyone out." I looked at him, my eyes wild with fear. "My daughter is in there," I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. "You have to save her. Please." He gave me a solemn nod, his eyes filled with a sadness I didn't want to recognize. "We're trying, ma'am. We're trying." And then, through the haze of smoke, I saw David. He was running out of the building, a child in his arms, his face etched with urgency. Relief flooded me for a brief, blissful second. He'd found her. He'd saved Lily, but as he came closer, my heart sank. The little girl in his arms wasn't Lily. It was Emma, his high school sweetheart's daughter. David knelt on the ground, holding Emma close, whispering to her, comforting her. His face was filled with relief, his arms wrapped tightly around her small body, like she was the most precious thing in the world. And I stood there, frozen, watching him hold another woman's child while our daughter was still inside. I wanted to scream, to run into the flames myself, to tear him away from her, to make him see what he'd done. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I was trapped, rooted to the spot, watching as the world around me burned. A firefighter approached, his face grim. He didn't need to say anything. I could see it in his eyes. Lily, my beautiful little girl, my heart, my soul, was gone. I felt my knees give way, the ground rising up to meet me as I collapsed, my vision blurred with tears. People were talking, reaching out to me, but I couldn't hear them. All I could hear was the sound of flames crackling, the echo of Lily's laughter in my mind. And in the background, through my blurred vision, I saw David, still holding Emma, his face filled with a tenderness he'd never shown me. In that moment, I realized that I had not only lost my daughter, but my husband as well. In the days following the fire, time lost all meaning. Daylight and darkness blurred together, just as the hours drifted in a fog I couldn't escape. I'd hear people talking around me, their voices muffled and distant, like they were underwater. Family members came by, offering words of comfort, trying to help, but no one could touch the hollow ache that consumed me. Nothing could fill the space where my daughter had been. I'd find myself wandering through the house, my hands brushing over Lily's things. A stuffed bunny she adored, her little shoes lined up by the door, her drawings pinned to the fridge. They were reminders of her, of the life she had filled with so much joy, of the laughter that used to echo through these rooms. Now every reminder felt like a stab to the heart. I wanted to hold on to them, to keep her memory alive, but each piece of her was a reminder of the unbearable truth. My daughter was gone. And David? He was nowhere to be found. He'd disappear for hours, sometimes all day, and when he did come home, it was like he was just a shell of the man I thought I'd known. He would walk through the door, his shoulders slumped, his face blank, barely acknowledging my presence. If he looked at me, it was with a hollow gaze that seemed to go right through me. It was as if I were a stranger to him, as if I'd faded into the background of his life, no longer worth his time. I tried to reach him, to talk to him, to pull him out of whatever dark place he was in, but each attempt was met with silence, with that same blank stare. And then, one evening, I overheard him on the phone, his voice soft, gentle, the kind of tone he hadn't used with me in years. "Emma?" he said, her name slipping from his lips with a warmth that sent a chill down my spine. "I'll come by tomorrow, I promise. Just hang in there, okay?" My heart clenched, a mixture of anger and hurt flooding me. I felt like I was drowning in grief, in loss, and the one person I thought I could lean on, the one person who was supposed to understand, was choosing to comfort someone else. He was choosing to be there for Emma, the woman who had haunted our marriage like a ghost, while I sat alone, mourning our daughter. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of pain and betrayal. The anger simmered beneath the surface, mixing with the sorrow, creating a bitterness I couldn't shake. I tried to remember the man I'd married, the man who had once promised to stand by me through everything. But that man felt like a distant memory, someone I'd loved a lifetime ago. Days turned into weeks, and the emptiness only grew. The house felt too big, too quiet, and each empty room was a reminder of the family we had lost. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay, that David's absence didn't tear me apart. So one night, when he finally came home, I decided to confront him. He was in the kitchen, making himself a cup of coffee, as if nothing were wrong. The sight of him, so calm, so detached, while I felt like I was crumbling from the inside, made my blood boil. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "David," I said, my tone barely above a whisper, but filled with all the pain I'd been holding in. "We need to talk." He looked up, almost startled, as if he hadn't realized I was still there, as if he'd forgotten I existed. "What is it?" he asked, his tone flat, like he was talking to a stranger. I felt my chest tighten, the words catching in my throat. "About Lily? About what happened? About us?" He sighed, setting his coffee cup down, his gaze distant, as if he were somewhere else entirely. "What do you want me to say?" The casualness of his tone, the indifference in his eyes, broke something inside me. "I want to know why," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Why you left her behind. Why you chose Emma's daughter over our own." A flash of anger crossed his face, his eyes narrowing. Emma's daughter was right there. She needed help, and I couldn't just leave her. "And Lily?" I choked out, tears streaming down my face. "She was your daughter, David. She was trapped in that building, and you left her." He looked away, his jaw clenched, refusing to meet my gaze. I did what I had to do. The coldness in his words was like a slap to the face. It was as if he couldn't see, couldn't understand the depth of the pain he'd caused. "What about me?" I asked, my voice breaking. I needed you to be here, to be with me, to grieve with me. But you left me alone." There was a long, painful silence, one that stretched between us like a chasm, unbridgeable, filled with all the things we could never say. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe we've just grown apart. The words were simple, but they cut deeper than anything else he could have said. In that moment, I realized that he had already let go, that he had moved on, that I was nothing more than a part of his past. After that night, I stopped trying. I stopped reaching out, stopped hoping that he would come back to me. It was as if I'd woken up from a dream where I'd thought we were a family, where I'd believed that we could get through anything together. But that dream was shattered, and I was left with the cold, hard reality of a marriage that had been built on lies. I started to see things more clearly, started to notice the small signs that I'd ignored, the tiny betrayals that had built up over the years. Emma had always been there, lingering in the background, a shadow that I'd tried to ignore, a ghost that haunted every corner of our life together. I remembered the first time I'd met her, how David's face had lit up when he introduced her, how he'd talked about her with a fondness that he'd never shown me. He'd told me she was just an old friend, that there was nothing to worry about. But deep down, I knew. I knew that part of him still belonged to her, that he would always choose her over me. And now, in the aftermath of our daughter's death, that truth was clearer than ever. He hadn't chosen me. He hadn't chosen our family. He'd chosen Emma, and he'd chosen her daughter. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was also freeing in a way. I no longer had to pretend, no longer had to play the role of the dutiful wife, waiting for a love that would never come. I could let go, could start to rebuild, could find a way to move forward on my own. The weeks turned into months, and the silence between us grew heavier, suffocating, until it felt like I couldn't breathe. I avoided him as much as I could, spending my days in Lily's room, surrounded by her things, finding solace in the memories that were all I had left. One evening, as I sat in the dim light of her room, holding her favorite stuffed bunny, I felt a surge of anger, a burning rage that had been simmering beneath the surface for too long. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't keep holding it all in, couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I walked into the living room where David was sitting, scrolling through his phone, his face expressionless. I stood there, staring at him, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. "David," I said, my voice trembling. "I can't do this anymore." He looked up, his face a mixture of surprise and irritation. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about us," I replied, my voice growing stronger. "I'm talking about the fact that you left our daughter to die while you saved someone else's child. I'm talking about the fact that you abandoned me, that you chose Emma over me, over Lily, over our family." He rolled his eyes, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "You don't understand. Emma needed me." "And what about me?" I shouted, the words bursting out of me like a dam breaking. "What about Lily? She was your daughter, David. She needed you, and you left her behind. You left me behind." There was a long, tense silence filled with all the hurt, all the anger that had been building between us. Finally he spoke, his voice cold, detached. Maybe this was a mistake. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The realization that he had already given up on us, that he had let go without a second thought, was almost more painful than losing Lily. I took a deep breath, the anger fading, replaced by a strange sense of calm. I didn't need him. I didn't need his love, his support, his empty promises. I could do this on my own. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving him behind. I knew that this was the end, that I would never look back. I moved into a small apartment, a modest space that felt strange and unfamiliar at first. The silence was overwhelming, but it was a different kind of silence, a peaceful one. A silence that held promise instead of pain. I filled my days with small routines, cooking, gardening, reading. I started seeing a therapist, someone who helped me process the grief, the anger, the betrayal. Slowly, I began to rebuild, to find pieces of myself that I'd lost over the years. I planted a small flower bed outside my apartment, filling it with lilies in memory of my daughter. Every morning, I would sit by the flowers, feeling a sense of peace, a quiet strength that I hadn't felt in a long time. And as the days turned into weeks, I realized that I was stronger than I'd ever known. I had survived the unthinkable, and I had come out the other side. I was no longer defined by the love I'd lost, by the man who had abandoned me. I was finding a new sense of self, a new kind of peace. One afternoon, as I sat by the small lake Lily and I used to visit, I felt a quiet sense of acceptance wash over me. I knew that the pain of losing her would never fully go away, that there would always be a part of me that missed her, that mourned for the life we could have had, but I also knew that I was strong, that I could carry that pain without letting it consume me. In those quiet moments, I thought about everything I'd been through, the love I'd lost, the life I'd left behind. I realized that I had survived, that I had found a way to move forward, to rebuild. I was no longer defined by my pain, by the people who had abandoned me. I was finally free, finally whole. As the sun set over the water, casting a warm golden glow, I felt a quiet smile spread across my face. I knew that the future was uncertain, that there would be challenges, but I also knew that I was strong enough to face them. I had learned to stand on my own, to find strength within myself, and in that strength, I had found a new beginning. Part 8. Embracing strength and moving forward. Months passed in a blur of small victories and quiet moments of grief. Each day felt like a new test of my strength, a balance between letting go and holding on to Lily's memory. The hardest part was accepting that some parts of my life would always be broken, that the loss of my daughter and the man I thought I loved would never truly heal. I took up new routines, ones that felt like personal rituals, tiny steps to keep moving forward. I'd start each morning with a walk along the lakeside where the cool air and gentle sound of the water helped clear my mind. I joined a support group where I met others who had faced unimaginable losses, each of us leaning on one another, finding strength in shared experiences. David tried reaching out a few times, leaving short, guilt-filled messages on my phone, his words layered with apologies that came far too late. I never returned those calls. There was nothing left to say, no wound his words could heal. I realized that forgiving him was not about him or what he'd done, but rather about freeing myself from the anger I'd been holding on to. One day, as I was packing away some of Lily's things, I came across a small journal she'd scribbled in. Inside were little drawings of our family, pictures she'd drawn of the two of us smiling, holding hands, or sitting by the lake. Her drawings reminded me of the innocence and love she'd brought into my life, and in that moment, I felt something shift within me. For the first time, I could look at her drawings and smile without the pain overshadowing every other feeling. I knew then that moving forward wasn't about forgetting her. It was about finding a way to carry her memory with me in a way that brought peace, not sorrow. The seasons changed, and with them, so did I. My new life, this quiet life, was nothing like the one I'd envisioned when David and I first got married, when I thought we'd raise our daughter together, that we'd be a family. But now, standing here alone, I felt a kind of peace that I'd never felt before. I was no longer haunted by what could have been. I had accepted that this was my life and that I had the strength to shape it however I wanted. As I watched the sunset over the lake one evening, a warmth spread through me. I felt ready to move forward, to create new memories, to embrace whatever the future held. And for those who may be listening or watching, my story is for you too. If you felt alone, lost, or broken by the people who were supposed to love you, know that there is still a way forward. You have the strength to create a new life, even if it doesn't look like the one you'd hoped for. Healing is never simple, and it's never fast, but it's worth it. If you found any part of my journey relatable, or know someone who could use a reminder of their own strength, please share this story. Let others know that they're not alone in their pain, that hope and healing are possible, even in the darkest times. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, where we explore resilience, hope, and the quiet power of finding your own path forward.